Welcome back to AfricanRadioOnline.com. You're tuning in to the Soulful Afro Show with Miss Yvette. Miss Yvette.
Thanks, Hassan. I want to read sort of a short paragraph from the Institute of the Black World, A Brief History on Reparations, before I introduce my very special guest, Sister Duwoti Desir. Reparations for Black Americans and others in the African diaspora is an issue that has been occasionally flared up in Black political circles since the end of slavery in the mid-19th century. It has been publicly opposed by several U.S. presidents and dismissed by most white Americans, but has always found a place on the Black political agenda. Today, the reparations movement has a new currency, and reparation advocates in the U.S. and around the world are being re-energized. Scores of them gathered in New York from April 9th to the 11th to participate in an unprecedented International Black Reparations Summit. One of the key speakers, the sister that had everybody clapping and jumping, they were ready to like jump out of their seats, is my special guest today, Mambo Dowoti Desir, who's the founder and president of DDPA Watch Group and Associates Inc. The DTPA Group Watch Group is an international human rights coalition associated with the Ogun Task Force, an interfaith group of Afro-Atlantic religions. Mambo Desir is also the interim chairperson of the UN Subcommittee for the Elimination of Racism of the NGO Committee on Human Rights and the co-chair of the Ubuntu Council, MIAT of the US Human Rights Network. She recently launched the UN International Decade for People of African Descent, 2015 to 2024, with benediction services at the Union Theological Seminar. Welcome, my dear. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here. So thrilled.
So we're gonna jump in. So you've been working on the reparations issue for some time. One of the things that when I got back, people are saying, are we gonna get our money back? And I have to be saying, it's not just about getting the money back. It's bigger. It's not just about the past. It's about today. It's about the hashtag Black Lives Matter and how it fits into this issue as we speak. So how would you answer and how would we educate the Soulful Afro family on what reparation means for us as people of African descent?
Well, that's a very good question. The issue of reparations has been one that has been brought to the table by a lot of other communities, even before the African descendant community. The challenge that we have faced is that people say, oh, but slavery, that was so long ago. And my ancestors, I don't know, maybe my ancestors owned slaves, maybe they didn't, but I don't own any. I haven't taken advantage of Black people in any way. There are all these excuses that people all over the world make, which deny white supremacy, first of all, and deny that they have been the beneficiaries of the exploitation of African descendants or people of African descent who were captives in the transatlantic slave trade. Now, I want to say that we have to keep in mind that there were oceanic slave trades and trans-Saharan slave trades.
There you go.
So within the context of what we are dealing with, which is the Durban Declaration and Program of Action Plan, which came out of an extensive document that came out of the World Conference Against Racism in 2001, Durban, South Africa, which declared the transatlantic slave trade a crime against humanity, and then opened the door of reparations, officially open at the UN. With that, we were able to make a formal legal argument stating that the impact of slavery is intergenerational. The creation of racism informed slavery. We have to understand that it became racialized in the 1600s, and the Catholic Church, among other things, permitted the racialization of the slave trade. So the slave trade became the world, the global world in Europe, in Africa, elsewhere, where Asia have we're getting permission to come and exploit us. And take us away and kidnap us and exploit us for all of our laborers. But with this charge of the Durban Declaration, again, legally the doors for reparations became open. We argued that, again, the free trade impact and colonization's impact, intergenerational, it has an infrastructure that still affects us. We look at the health and education disparities amongst our people, if we look at the industrial complex, all of these are outgrowths. All of these are outgrowths of slavery and the slave trade of captive Africans and colonization. So that everyone benefits from that. And even in places where there was not with the history of enslavement of African people, folks still benefit from the white supremacy because they can do something to treat us as nothing, as we don't matter, as our lives, our history doesn't matter. So this is a critical thing.
So one of the things that we heard in the 3 days that we were at the summit continually, and you just touched on it, is how it's had an impact on our daily lives today. And one of those very strong visual, emotional impacts is the dehumanizing of our community, the dehumanizing of the Black men in our community with all the recent shootings. And how do we connect that to a reparations issue? Because that is a long-standing issue, a long-standing impact that then goes into the issue of the prison industrial complex. You know, we are Black men and Latino men are the highest numbers in the prison industrial complex, and it's the new slave quarters and how that relates to the issue of reparations. You know, one of the things that was one of the issues that came up in the 3 days is this sort of our need to gain. We know who we are. Like someone said, we are the mothers and daughters and fathers of humanity. But no one sees us that way, or the colonizers still don't see us that way and treat us that way.
Right. Well, my sister, I have to ask the question, and it's not my intention to contradict you. But do we know who we are?
Well, yeah.
You know,
I don't think we know.
Yeah, because part of the issue of reparations, as you raised in the first question, it isn't just about money. It isn't just financial and economic, but it is spiritual. It is a scholarship, which means our education, and it is moral. So one of the key things is those of us who are involved in the movement, those of us who are part of certain social communities or activists, we know who we are. But the bulk of our people do not know who they are. This whole the textbooks, depending on when you're able to get to school, number one. And then in the textbooks that are being written and printed by whom and where. Oftentimes, we're not the ones who are writing those books. We're not the ones who are studying about ourselves when we're at primary, secondary schools. It's not until, if we're lucky, we're in colleges that we're able to learn about Black history or the history of African descendants in general. And keep in mind, the system of slavery and colonization has been in place for about 500 years.
Yes.
Black Studies Department, Africana Studies Department, how old are they?
Yeah.
They're only about 50 years old.
Yeah.
So the overwhelming majority of our people have only recently had the privilege of knowing something about who we are. I come from the Caribbean, like you, and I'm always stunned at, even in the case that I see with our tremendous history.
Yes.
Fighting the slave trade, there is still not sufficient information passed on to young people about, first of all, our history before slavery, and then the impact of enslavement of Africans in the Americas. That information just isn't in the books. So the issue of reparations is also you have a history.
Exactly.
Nobody knows who you are. So it doesn't matter. If somebody does not, in the West, human needs to have history. And so as long as we don't know what our histories are, be that in intellectual history, a history that's based in theology, a history that's based in economics, then we're not recognized as being human. And that's a huge part of the battle.
Absolutely. And
Humanity.
And I totally agree because you and I, we do the work. And interestingly enough, we have been in the 3 spaces in the last month and a half together. We participated in the birthing of the decade with Sister Iman at the Commission on the Status of Women at the UN. We were at the Women of Ashe with the Caribbean Cultural Center and then at the summit. And in all 3 spaces, we have to always talk about the fact that we are connected to the larger context of people of African descent as women of the diaspora, me from Latin America with Caribbean descent and you from the Caribbean. And people still don't know what that means. People still don't know how your racial and your ethnic identity are 2 separate things. How we ourselves as a people have a hard time saying we are people of African descent. That alone is not just an education outside of our community. It is also an education within our community for people to understand that term of what it means to be an Afro-descendant. And so one of the things too that came up in the summit was the importance of Haiti and the importance of acknowledging Haiti, the importance of putting ourselves in Haiti as the first people who freed themselves, and how that has impacted Haiti today, and how we need to make ourselves, call out those things that are happening to the people of Haiti and see ourselves in the people of Haiti. And you as a woman from this beautiful island, what do you say to that?
Well, I was just thinking about a Creole proverb that says, in other words, what happens to the turkey will happen to the hen as well. So if something has happened to IC, or something did happen in IC, and it was something that actually, in terms of the slavery and colonization, expressed, it represented what happened to some will argue as many as 100 million people in the transatlantic slave trade. So for now, the official numbers are around the 30 million mark. But what happened in terms of the revolution from 1791 to 1803 was symptomatic of a long history of resistance Africans have always had, even in captures on the continent, across the slave ships, and in the Americas as well as Europe, because we cannot forget that we have enslaved Africans who found themselves in Europe as well. So the revolution, and the success of the revolution, it tended to create spaces that liberated not only our bodies, our minds, our spirits, our territories. The Haitian Constitution of 1805 actually gave the right to freedom and citizenship to any African person that could make themselves to our shores. And so in the U.S., for instance, you had these colonization arguments that were taking place about whether African Americans, well, they were African Americans, but Africans in the U.S. were to stay in the United States and be recognized as their quote-unquote citizens, or if they should come to places like Haiti or Liberia and in a way return back to the homeland that way. So the revolution created a space for us. But then we're penalized. For that. What happens to pay the equivalent of $21 million in reparations? All right?
That you had to pay back.
Yes. So the victim has to pay restitution to its oppressor. And so the example of IEC is always used to threaten African descendants, wherever we are, whenever we want to liberate ourselves, whenever we want autonomy, to just say, remember IEP.
Yeah.
And then people become intimidated because nobody wants to be IEP, right? Nobody wants to be put in debt. Nobody wants to become a pariah and diplomatically and economically isolated. So there's a perversion of the concept of reparations as the white historic oppressors imposed upon us. What the Gender Declaration has served to do is just turn this thing on its head. But even before the Gender Declaration, which was in 2001, in early 1990s, Dr. Khan, he, the president of Haiti, demanded reparations of flag.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So it's a long, complex history of reparations that we have. It took 500 years for us to get to this point. I hope it's not going to take another 500 years to
Right. So we had 3 days. We were completely, really, really, really energized. That we need to keep this going. I am completely moved and honored to be one of the commissioners. What is your message to those who are saying, because there are folks out there, because I have friends and family who are like, you're crazy, what are you going to get out of this? HR 40 has been sitting there for so long. What is your message as you close out your time with us on the Soulful Afro Show to those who are for and understand what we're doing and those who do not understand what we're doing?
Well, what is important is that we have to remember that in effect we're involved in a form of diplomacy, right? Some at a formal governmental level, others at an informal, sort of soft diplomacy level. But whether or not we are directly involved as government officials, as activists, or for regular people, there are structures that have to be put in place in order to secure reparations. So we have to ensure that we are part of a formal legal structure that recognizes any mechanisms, any structure that we put in place to secure reparations. This is a legal thing. You can't do it, as my African brothers and sisters say, yama yama. You just can't do jurisdiction. You just can't do it really like that. So we need to have a formal legal structure for this. We have to recognize geopolitical differences among us, and historic differences among us that are going to impact the nature of reparations and the strategies that we put in place in our different regions. But to do that, that also means that we have to understand what the nature of Pan-Africanism is. And what it means to have a transnational identity. You and I are interesting that way. You have many of my nationalities.
Yeah.
Your family came from
the Caribbean. Yes.
The U.S.
Yeah.
I know that I'm a young generation Ghanaian who ended up in Haiti. I have Haitian and American nationality. My mother's from Cuba. So this is the complex nature of our existence. And so we need to take advantage of what lessons have we learned as a result of being exposed to all of these different, the sabors of being African. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And share that with our brothers and sisters. And then relative to that, one hand we're substantiating our identity. On the other hand, we also understand that we are sacred people.
Absolutely. We are beloved ones. We are beloved ones. Sacred people and beloved ones,
Yes. And so we're sacred, we're beloved, but we're also faithless. Faithless. Outside of the African continent and some places in the Caribbean, many people, African descendants in Latin America, in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, in Asia, are faithless. We're like Palestinians that way. We don't have formal representation by our government.
Yes.
So this is part of the sort of strategy and some of the issues. It's not just, like theoretical, but we got to think about these things and how to figure out how do we make these our our conditions work for us. How we put ourselves in a place of power and liberation so that the differences amongst us aren't used against us, and that our government understands that we are owed reparations in the sense, in the form of apologies, in terms of social and political economic policies, in the sense of education, that we need compensation for what has happened to us, and that current practices, that are in place need to be changed, especially with regard to that military-industrial complex that takes all of our lives away, not just our brothers and our husbands and our sons, but it takes all of our lives away. Because as African people, the idea is to want you. I am because you are.
Absolutely.
It's a special thing that we should never lose sight of.
Absolutely.
My life is directly impacted by yours, and yours by mine. And this is also why we need to have a unified stand. And of course, this should never, ever, ever, ever happen again to anyone. Enslavement, colonization, and its various, manifestations. Those are the things I would say we need to walk away knowing.
Thank you so much for coming on, for spending time. You have to come back. This is not your first and your last. I'm sure the Soulful Afro family will have questions, and we will have this out in the next few days for folks who missed it, for them to listen to the whole thing. But thank you so much, sister, for what you're doing. It has been an honor and a pleasure to be in spaces with you. You are one true queen warrior. So thank you and be blessed.
Yes, you be well. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
We'll be right back. We're going to take a pause and we'll continue this conversation. To get the high on the side.